What if the harshest judgments people make against others are secretly revealing the condition of their own hearts? What if the standards we use to measure others are the same standards God will one day use to measure us? And what if many people spend their lives trying to fix everyone else while remaining blind to the problems inside themselves? Jesus stood before the crowd and spoke words that still challenge humanity today. His message cut through pride, hypocrisy, and self-righteousness with uncomfortable honesty. The people listening that day lived in a culture filled with religious criticism, public shame, and constant judgment. People measured each other by appearance, status, behavior, and outward morality. But Jesus exposed something deeper. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. At first, many people misunderstand those words. Some assume Jesus meant that truth no longer matters, or that right and wrong no longer exist. But that was not his message at all. Jesus himself spoke clearly about sin, repentance, and righteousness throughout his ministry. What he condemned was the prideful, hypocritical spirit that delights in condemning others while ignoring personal sin. There is something inside human nature that loves comparison. People feel better about themselves when they can point to someone else's failures. Criticism creates the illusion of superiority. Gossip becomes entertainment. Judgment becomes a way to elevate oneself while pushing others down. But Jesus warned that this attitude is spiritually dangerous, because the person constantly condemning others often forgets how much mercy they themselves need from God. Jesus continued, "Forgive, and you will be forgiven." That statement reveals a powerful spiritual principle. Mercy changes everything. The world often teaches people to hold grudges, protect pride, and demand revenge. Forgiveness is seen as weakness. Many believe that letting go of offense means surrendering power. But Jesus revealed that unforgiveness becomes a prison. People replay painful moments repeatedly in their minds. They relive betrayals, they carry bitterness for years. Sometimes the person who caused the pain has already moved on, yet the wounded person remains emotionally chained to the memory. Unforgiveness quietly steals peace. It poisons joy. It hardens the heart. And often it spreads pain into every other relationship. Jesus wanted his followers to live differently. Not because pain is unreal, not because injustice does not matter, but because mercy frees the soul. Then Jesus gave one of the most famous statements in the Gospel of Luke: "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over." Most people immediately think about money when hearing those words. But Jesus was speaking about something even larger: the entire posture of the human heart. Whatever people pour into the lives of others often returns to them. Mercy creates mercy. Kindness spreads kindness. Compassion influences compassion. But cruelty, judgment, and hatred also multiply. Jesus then delivered a warning that reaches directly into modern culture. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Think about that carefully. How patient are you with others? How quickly do you criticize? How easily do you assume the worst? How often do you extend grace? Because Jesus said the standards people apply to others reveal the standards they themselves may face. This should humble every human being. No one is perfect. Every person has hidden struggles. Every person has weaknesses. Every person has moments they hope others will overlook and forgive. Yet many people still rush to expose the flaws of others while hiding their own. Jesus then used a powerful image that the crowd would never forget. Can the blind lead the blind? Will they not both fall into a pit? The meaning was sharp and direct. Spiritually blind people often try to guide others while failing to recognize their own condition. Pride creates blindness. Self-righteousness blinds people to their own sin. Arrogance convinces people they are spiritually mature while they continue harming others through judgment and hypocrisy. This still happens constantly today. Some people are experts at identifying faults in others but never examine themselves honestly. They criticize everyone around them. They constantly complain. They act morally superior. Yet inside, their own hearts remain filled with pride, anger, jealousy, greed, or unforgiveness. Jesus warned that blind spiritual leadership leads to destruction. Then he said something deeply revealing. The student is not above the teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like their teacher. Whether people realize it or not, they become shaped by what they follow. A person constantly consuming anger often becomes angry. A person surrounding themselves with negativity becomes negative. A person learning from prideful voices often becomes prideful themselves. That is why Jesus called his followers to learn from him. Because his heart reflected mercy, truth, humility, and compassion perfectly. Then came one of the most unforgettable illustrations Jesus ever gave. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? The image almost sounds humorous at first. Imagine someone trying to remove a tiny speck from another person's eye while carrying a massive wooden beam across their own face. The crowd likely laughed when hearing it, but then the deeper meaning hit them. Human beings often exaggerate the faults of others while minimizing their own flaws. A small mistake in another person suddenly feels enormous, but personal sin becomes easy to justify. People excuse their own anger while condemning someone else's impatience. They defend their own gossip while criticizing another person's dishonesty. They rationalize their own pride while attacking someone else's arrogance. Jesus exposed this hypocrisy directly. You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly. Notice something important here. Jesus did not say people should never help others grow or never speak truth. He said self-examination must come first. Humility must come first. Repentance must come first. A person who honestly confronts their own weakness becomes far more compassionate toward others. Why? Because they understand how much grace they themselves need. One of the greatest dangers in spiritual life is self-righteousness. Self-righteous people often appear moral outwardly, but inwardly they become cold, harsh, and prideful. They compare themselves constantly to others. They focus more on exposing sin than extending mercy. But Jesus consistently challenged that mindset. Throughout the Gospels, some of the harshest words Jesus ever spoke were directed toward religious hypocrisy. Not toward broken sinners seeking mercy, not toward struggling people searching for hope, but toward those who acted spiritually superior while lacking compassion. Why did Jesus respond so strongly to hypocrisy? Because hypocrisy distorts the image of God. It pushes wounded people away from grace. It creates fear instead of healing. It replaces humility with pride, and often it blinds people to their own desperate need for mercy. The truth is that every human being has blind spots. Everyone has weaknesses they fail to notice about themselves. That is why humility matters so deeply. A humble person remains teachable. They listen. They examine their heart honestly. They admit mistakes. They seek growth instead of pretending perfection. Pride does the opposite. Pride refuses correction. Pride always blames others. Pride protects image at all costs, and pride often disguises itself as righteousness. Jesus was calling his followers into a completely different way of living. Instead of rushing to condemn, they were called to show mercy. Instead of elevating themselves above others, they were called to walk in humility. Instead of focusing obsessively on others' flaws, they were called to examine their own hearts first. This teaching becomes even more important in modern culture. Today, judgment spreads faster than ever. One mistake online can lead to public humiliation from thousands of strangers. People often form opinions instantly without knowing the full story. Social media rewards outrage. Criticism gains attention. Compassion is often drowned out by anger. Many people have become addicted to judgment. They analyze every flaw, attack every failure, expose every weakness. And sometimes they do it while hiding deep struggles of their own. Jesus' words challenge this culture directly. First, take the plank out of your own eye. Imagine how different the world would become if people practiced that daily. Imagine pausing before criticizing, pausing before assuming, pausing before condemning. Imagine asking, am I showing the same grace I hope others would show me? Am I correcting from love or from pride? Am I speaking truth with humility or with arrogance? These questions reveal the condition of the heart. Jesus understood that judgment often comes from insecurity. Some people criticize others constantly because it temporarily makes them feel superior. By focusing on someone else's flaws, they avoid confronting their own pain, weakness, or emptiness. But external criticism never heals internal brokenness. Only God can transform the human heart, and transformed hearts become more merciful. This does not mean abandoning truth or pretending sin is acceptable. Love sometimes requires honest correction. Parents correct children, friends warn friends, spiritual leaders guide people toward righteousness. But the spirit behind correction matters deeply. Correction without love becomes cruelty, truth without humility becomes arrogance, and judgment without mercy becomes hypocrisy. Jesus demonstrated this balance perfectly. When he encountered sinners, he showed compassion while still calling them toward repentance. He protected the vulnerable while challenging destructive behavior. He offered grace without compromising truth. That is the example believers are called to follow. Not harsh condemnation, not careless approval of sin, but truthful compassion, merciful honesty, humble correction. There is another important reason Jesus warned against judgment. Human understanding is limited. People rarely know the full story behind someone's struggles. A person may appear distant because they are carrying grief. Someone may seem angry because they are deeply wounded. Another may act harshly because they themselves were raised without love. Only God sees every detail completely. Only God knows every hidden battle. That realization should create humility. Many people judge quickly based on appearance, rumors, assumptions, or brief moments. But God sees what no one else can see. He sees pain hidden behind smiles, fear hidden behind confidence, loneliness hidden behind success. And because God sees fully, his judgment is perfect. Human judgment is often incomplete and flawed. That is why mercy matters so much. Mercy recognizes that every person is a human being in need of grace, including ourselves. The longer people walk with God, the more aware they often become of their own weakness. Spiritual maturity does not create arrogance, it creates humility. The Apostle Paul, one of the greatest leaders in Christian history, openly acknowledged his need for God's mercy. Truly godly people rarely walk around acting superior. Instead, they remain deeply aware of how much grace they themselves have received. That awareness changes how they treat others. Harshness softens, patience grows, compassion deepens. Because people who understand mercy become more willing to extend mercy. Jesus also knew something important about judgment. The way people treat others eventually shapes their own hearts. A constantly critical spirit becomes miserable over time. Nothing is ever good enough. Everyone becomes a target. Joy disappears, peace fades, relationships suffer. But merciful people experience freedom differently. Mercy protects the heart from becoming hardened. Forgiveness releases bitterness. Humility creates peace. And compassion reflects the heart of God. This teaching ultimately points people back to the gospel itself. Every believer stands before God not because they achieved perfection, but because they received mercy through Jesus Christ. No one earns salvation through moral superiority. No one reaches God by proving they are better than others. Everyone comes through grace. That truth destroys pride. At the foot of the cross, every person stands equally in need of forgiveness. And when people truly understand the mercy they have received from God, they become slower to condemn others, because they remember who they were before grace changed them. Perhaps that is one of the greatest signs of spiritual maturity. Not how loudly someone speaks about truth, not how many faults they can identify in others, but how deeply they reflect the mercy of Christ. Jesus was not calling people into weakness. He was calling them into humility, into honesty, into compassion, into self-examination, into love shaped by truth and mercy together. Today his words remain just as powerful. Do not judge, forgive, give. First take the plank out of your own eye. These teachings confront pride in every generation, and perhaps the hardest part is this. Most people immediately think of someone else who needs this message instead of applying it to themselves. That alone reveals how deeply human nature struggles with self-awareness. But the moment someone truly allows these words to enter their own heart, transformation begins. Because humility opens the door to growth. Mercy opens the door to healing, and grace changes everything. So before criticizing another person today, pause. Before condemning, reflect. Before exposing someone else's flaws, examine your own heart first. And remember how much mercy God has already shown you. Because the measure people use for others reveals much about the condition of their own soul. Thank you for watching this video. If this message challenged and encouraged you, please like this video, share it with someone who may need this reminder, and subscribe to Holy Path Insights for more biblical teachings that strengthen faith and transform hearts. May God fill your life with wisdom, humility, mercy, and peace.